Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's edition of our inService podcast at Service Council. I am Gerardo Pelayo, Vice President of Research and Advisory here in Service Council. And today we have a very exciting topic. Our session is titled Beyond the Financial ROI, Artificial Intelligence in Field Service. And we're excited to welcome Michael Hughes, who's the Global Head of Service at Peak Scientific Instruments. Thank you for joining us, Mike. We'll get to an introduction formally in just a second. But before, let me do just a very abbreviated introduction to the topic, because there's a lot of insights that I know you'll be able to offer to this. And the main thing that has come to me as we have had plenty of artificial intelligence during conversations as of late, certainly over the last few months, is that quite often, for all the disruption that it promises and all the transformation that we want to accomplish with it, sometimes we maintain some of the old assumptions. And as we think of what we want to accomplish and how are we going to measure the benefits, seeing if the technology pays off, we should even evaluate it in the same way that we've done it with other tools. And as we expand the lens of what is possible with artificial intelligence within the service concept, that is what brings us to today's discussion and learning about the journey that Mike has gone through. Very brief housekeeping. So today's session, as always, is being recorded, and it will be available in all the platforms that you like for following your podcast, from YouTube, Apple, Spotify, etc., you name it, so that you can go back, catch some of the insights, the comments, share with your friends. And last but not least, for our LinkedIn audience, listening audience, we like you to be a participating audience as well. So you have the option to comment if you agree, if you disagree with any of the comments, have a question that you'd like to double click on, you can do so, and we'll do our best to incorporate that in the conversation as we move along. So without further ado, Mike, formally introducing you, I had a chance to get to know you. We are humbled to have recently welcomed you into our EMEA advisory board at Service Council, now having you here in the podcast. For the audience that may not be familiar with yourself and Peak Scientific, do you mind giving us an introduction?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And thank you very much, Gerardo, for inviting me along and having me on the podcast today. It's a privilege to be here and get to discuss this topic with all of your listeners. So, Mike Hughes, as some of you may already be able to tell from my accent, I come from Scotland, the UK. I am currently the Global Head of Service at Peak Scientific Limited. And Peak are a market leader in the manufacture and service of lab gas generators, primarily. So that's nitrogen, dry air, and hydrogen, mainly in the analytical and life sciences spaces. But we also manufacture products for industrial and in other applications as well.
Nice. And just to double click on that for a little bit, can you talk more about how does the service relationship with your customers look like?
Absolutely, yes. So our service proposition is central, not just to our product and our business, but also to our brand. Our product, the gas generator, forms part of a larger workflow. Typically in analytical labs, it's LCMS, GCMS, etc. And that workflow is dependent upon our product working. So our role, my role in the service organisation, is to make sure that the gas keeps flowing. What sets Peak apart, and always has, from our competitors is the service offering that we have, where we have a global footprint of field service engineers that support these products in the aftermarket. So as a business, we are just over 700 people globally, And when you look at our turnover, our annual turnover, 40% of that is in service. And between 30 to 40% of our global headcount is in service across the sale and delivery of service contracts, etc. on the product.
Great. So it's always encouraging to hear service taking a more prominent role, and we see that opportunity continuing to grow. It was one of the trends that we called out at the beginning of the year, and the data is reinforcing that on a daily basis. So one of the things that I want to do before we jump into the AI topic is understand a little bit of the context of what is the North Star for you. We just wrapped up our service leaders agenda research a couple of weeks ago, presented the summary findings last week. And one of the takeaways that we saw over there is that the metrics, the roadblocks, the focus areas that service leaders were perceiving were more influenced by their core objectives rather than the vertical or the size of the organization even. So can you share what is top of mind for you right now from a service organization perspective?
Sure. I think I would say top of mind, there are two things really. And the first one is around how do we use innovation to stay at the forefront of our market and improve our value proposition? We are in an extremely fortunate space that we are the market leaders in what we do. It is relatively niche, but the question is when you're number one, how do you stay number one? So the kind of things that we are thinking about as an organization now is how can we be the disruptors in our own space to make sure that we maintain our position, and we not just maintain, but we also continue to scale and improve what we offer to our customers. That can only happen with innovation. You can't go through that by continuing to do the things that you've always done. So that's number one. And number two, not that it's very far behind, is the frontline experience of our people, particularly our FSEs and our technical support specialists, who are the ones that are out there with the customer, the ones who do keep the gas flowing, as we describe it. Because in my role as service leader, it's really all about how do I improve the experience that they have, and how do I and my colleagues make sure that we empower and enable them to do what really matters, and that's to look after the customer. So those are the two things that are constantly top of mind.
Yeah, very interesting. And we'll peel that onion, but I'll preface it by saying that there's a very close relationship that we've observed in the way that the employee experience is being driven and the level of engagement that we see in the front line, and the ability of organizations to innovate and capture that pulse of the customer. So you talked about innovation, and perhaps there is nothing more disruptive right now in the conversation than artificial intelligence. Another research effort that we just conducted earlier in the year is our state of artificial intelligence and service technology survey, and over there, very promising results in terms of the impact that organizations are observing. 3 in 5 service leaders reported that they already see impact coming from their AI initiatives. 1 in 5 is in the process of that, and the other 1 out of 5 have not yet begun implementing AI within their operations. So where are you along all of this journey, from evaluation, pilot, implementation?
So I would say we are still right at the start. So from those, I would say we're in the evaluation phase. For me, the journey really it started quite literally at the Service Council Symposium in Chicago last September, where I'll be honest that I came along to that symposium on a bit of a fact-finding mission, and I wanted to understand what other organisations were doing with IoT. And I quickly realised IoT is yesterday's news and AI is what everyone's talking about. I was also then lucky enough to sit in on some of the tech playback sessions, and it really hit me. I would say it hit me square in the face how the applications for AI that the providers of service focused AI platforms have found that can really speak to some of the specific challenges and ergo use cases that we have at Peak right now. So really what I've been doing ever since then is doing the investigation and also evangelizing about the potential benefits of AI, particularly in the service context. So we're going through the evaluation right now. We are refining what our initial use cases will be. I think it is important to think about initial use cases.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going through that. We'll talk about ROI a little bit in a few minutes. We're also looking at what the potential ROI is going to be, and we're assessing different vendors and so on.
Oh, that's so a couple of things to unpack there. First off, it's great to hear that your participation at the symposium triggered these thoughts and expanded the mindset. That is very much aligned with the objective, and hoping to have you there once again. We're going to be in Chicago September 8th through the 10th. Invitation to the general audience as well. Um, but um, but then the other thing that you called out was this initial use cases, right? And when within the same survey that I was just talking about, as we asked organizations, where are you seeing the initial impact and what are you targeting? It was interesting that the top three areas was improved customer experience, improved frontline experience, and the third, an increased ability to capture expert knowledge. So in your case, what are the challenges that you're trying to address through artificial intelligence? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, like I said, top of mind right now is frontline experience. Um, and as I said, it's really about how can we enable our teams to do the best job they can to better serve our customers. And that's where the opportunities really arise when you look at the feedback that I know you have the numbers on around feedback from our frontline people about the amount of time that they spend looking for and searching for information. So knowledge search is a big one to start with. The efficiency gains there by reducing that admin time can be significant, but also all of that admin time that you're saving is quicker resolution for the customer as well. So that's a really strong use case for us. The second one then closely following that is capturing the expert knowledge. Over the last few months, as I've been discussing this topic with other people in this space, it's actually been quite reassuring to find that many organizations are in exactly the same position where they have challenges around tribal knowledge in the business, coupled with experience leaving the business in the silver tsunami that people talk about,
Mm-hmm.
and also some of the basics around how accessible is the information that people are looking for. Is that technical answer that somebody's looking for, is it buried within a manual somewhere? Is it buried within this technical bulletin but not this manual? Those are very real day-to-day frontline experience issues that we see the evidence that a service-focused AI platform can really help with.
Yeah, and so again, I I was taking some notes as you were talking about that, and the time spent looking for information really resonates. We conduct a couple of research efforts on the voice of the frontline, and for contact center agents, time spent looking for information is the number one source of friction. For field service engineers, it's still number two, but it's rapidly approaching number one. It even was at the top of the list until 2 weeks before we closed the survey. So the volume of data is only going to continue to increase. The applications, the platform's interoperability becoming a bigger issue, and that consumption of the knowledge, so that it's not just there, but that there's a process to easily make it accessible for the technicians when they need it in a way that they can trust it, is absolutely critical. And so we talked and positioned this a little bit from the near-term use cases, but how does this also I want to get into how does this connect to Pic's roadmap for service in general? Because some of the things that we've observed as pre-requirements to be successful around AI, it's not just a plug and play situation. We we were interested, for instance, in whether having a clear and coherent business strategy for AI had an impact, and we found it to be a necessary condition for that impact, but not sufficient. And what is actually showing a stronger correlation to the outcomes observed so far in practice is those service leaders that categorize their AI vision as being a core part to the service organization strategy. So it's no longer this perception as a single tool, but AI becomes embedded in the fabric of the or across the fabric of the service organization. So with this as background, I'll go back to the question and say, on the use cases that you've started to talk about, how do they connect to the long-term roadmap from a peak perspective over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a great point, and there are many different aspects to that, I guess, because so we landed on our roadmap for the next 3 years last year before AI was on my radar, and that was quite specifically about we called it at the time the life of an FSC. How do we improve the life of an FSC? Because it's the right thing to do. It helps with retention of staff. It helps with efficiency. It helps with how those FSCs can serve the customer, and that's great. I think the key when it comes to where is AI in your strategy, it should not be let's deploy AI because everybody's talking about it, so we'll do it too. I think the key is to be intentional with it and understand the fact that there are different types of AI for different needs. It's not about saying to our frontline staff, "Hey, you can use ChatGPT now." It's not about that at all. It is about those intentional use cases, and there are so many facets to service that you could come up with. You could come up with dozens of different potential use cases, whether it's knowledge search, guided fault finding, whether it's parts identification, whether it's really a huge part of your plan to shift left and have the customer be able to self-serve. It'll vary from organization to organization, but like I say, the real key that I find, and based on all of the feedback that I've had so far, is it's important to be intentional and take it almost one use case at a time. So figure out what are the most pertinent challenges or the most important KPIs that you have as a business, distill that down into the use case, and understand if AI can help.
And if I can double click on one of those use cases that you talked about, so parts identification, service parts in general is emerging as a very big opportunity to influence the growth of the organization, to directly influence the customer experience. But at the same time, we continue to hear from the frontline that the whole interaction with parts is not without friction. There's visibility sometimes is not ideal. The troubleshooting. So can you elaborate on what does it mean when you talk about parts identification and that use case within the context of PIC?
Sure. So I think under that parts identification comment, there can be two sides to that. And one very much overlaps with kind of guided fault finding and troubleshooting. So identification of the part that the unit requires. And the whole guided troubleshooting aspect, we could probably have an entire podcast on that alone.
Mm.
And the other one is also tying in with the access to information. And if you're an organization that has 250 products that you've manufactured over a history of 25 years, you've got a strong program of continuous improvement, you've got strong vendor relationships, you benefit from product improvements there, you can very quickly have a situation where there is a real matrix of what product do I have, what revision is it at, what upgrades has it had, which version of the component do I need. So if you're not really, really on top of revision control, traceability in the system, serialized products, serialized parts, etc., and most manufacturing and service organizations are not where they want to be in these areas. This is where there's a real opportunity for a tool that can do the investigation piece,
Hmm.
because that's what your frontline staff are having to do in those situations. They have to go on an investigation path to say, um, is it revision A or revision B of this part that I need? And that's the kind of thing that we found from our feedback, and I know you found in surveys as well, that frustrates frontline staff. So anything that we can do to give them a tool that takes that burden away from them is absolutely a powerful thing.
Yeah, and I commend you for thinking about it in this way. One of um, the bigger opportunity areas that we've been advocating for is the maturity of the employee experience. I'm thinking about it in a more broad sense than just productivity and efficiency. So the reason why I double clicked and thank you for doing that is it brings this concept to a very pragmatic impact on the day in the life of the technician. And one of the most revealing statistics that comes to mind is that while north of 80% of technicians say that data and technology has made them more efficient and productive, less than 60% say that it has helped to reduce their level of mental stress. So there's something that we're not doing optimally if we're not providing that safety net, if we're not taking away those moments of frustration and unnecessary waste of time, so that we can empower the technicians to do what they like and they know doing, which is the actual fixing of the equipment and the ongoing learning as well, both about the technology and about the assets themselves. So
Yeah,
really important and really refreshing to see how that impact on the day in the life experience is paramount in your AI
absolutely.
efforts.
Yeah,
Having said all of
absolutely.
that, I also think it's not healthy to go completely the other way around and forget about the financial results. Right, one of the things that is important to maintain is that balance. And I would expect that while you've expanded our definition of an ROI, there's still a business case that you've had to build at Big Scientific in order to get this moving. Could you talk a little bit about that? What is it that you're expecting to observe? 40% of service leaders still cite that lack of clarity on the ROI as the biggest roadblock that they face to kick things off in with technology deployments. So, what was the business case like in your situation?
Yeah, so I think it's really important the point you make. These these two things have to coexist in balance. You know, the intent to just want to help your frontline people, and how you actually measure the effectiveness of what you're doing. And the truth is that while um, the motivation for a project like this, or specifically I or anything else, well, the motivation may be A, and it could be customer experience, frontline experience, KPI improvement. The bottom line is sooner or later there has to be a justification that's going to be financial as well. You know, as service leaders, we can focus on the customer in the front line, but it's also incumbent upon us when we go to our respective boards and we have a conversation with the CFO about a 6 or a 7 figure investment. We need to have a way to measure that, and that's clear. What I would say is the reality for many of us in service is we're not short of metrics. We're not short of metrics around utilization, around truck rolls, around parts used. The big one for us is first time fix. But at peak in particular, we actually have, in a way, something that's a really good challenge to have, which is our first time fix is and has been north of 95% for many years now. So we're well into the realm of diminishing returns. So what kind of a game changer would we need to deploy to take us from 95 to 98%? And how would you then measure financially the benefit of that in the reduced repeat visits, reduced truck rolls from repeat visits, etc. So the truth is, there are many different ways that you can look at the ROI calculation on something like an AI platform for service. So an efficiency gain, quite straightforward to measure what your efficiency gain is in terms of time to search and that admin time. The question then is, how do you link that through to how do you then use that efficiency gain? So there's an increase in capacity there. Is that increase in capacity going to be used to improve output and you're going to tie your ROI to improved output? Or are you potentially going to tie that ROI to reduced staff turnover? So more engagement from your frontline staff, better retention, whatever that measure is. I think the point to make is it'll vary from business to business, but you need to be clear on what is the intent. And that's where I come back to what the use case and what the intent is. So for us, we are looking at things like primarily time to search and an efficiency gain in that respect. We're looking at time to onboard and time to competence for our staff. That's an area where an AI tool can really, really help. If you consider when you're training a new person, and it varies from organisation what that time to competency is, how much of the training element of a new person is training them where to find, training them where to search for the information that they need. So there are lots of efficiency gains for training and onboarding as well. Then you get into some of the more really tangible and specific service focused measures that you might want to base your ROI on. So parts used. A term that I've heard so much more often since I've been in part of these discussions is parts shotgunning. Now, I never referred to it as parts shotgunning before, and I use the term all the time. And if that's something that you're aware of as a challenge in your business right now and something that you can measure quite easily, which most service organizations can, then there's really a potential solid ROI case on parts usage. It's particularly important for an organization like ours where our maintenance proposition is largely contract based. So the customers paid their annual premium, if you like, and then the cost to maintain that unit is then ours. So when we can really deep dive into how many parts do we consume per job, why do we consume those parts? Is it because of quote unquote parts shotgunning, and how do we then reduce that? So those are some of the opportunities that I feel are there, and some of the ones that we're going to focus on at peak.
Yeah, no, thank you for going into such intricate detail on that. There was actually a question which you just played, which was exactly around how do you think about the making sure that the AI efforts translate into an impact in a way that reduces the risk. I believe you touched on all the things of how you're thinking about them and how to be successful. I'll just supplement by saying we have a service index, which is a framework to assess the maturity of an organization to deliver on service. And the 5 key components within the experience are the foundation at the data and execution level, the translation of the data, the process or execution compliance, and the management of outcomes. And the most recurrent reason that I see for failed implementations is when there's not a balance between these things. There's sometimes a very strong foundation that doesn't get utilized. There's a strong analytical components with data that is not trusted, or there's a very poor compliance against in the follow through of the actions. I believe a more balanced approach across these 5 dimensions is something important and something happy to expand on in a follow-up for those interested. Um, I'll I'll say I was delinquent in looking at some of the comments, but you've been getting a good number of kudos for the overview and the level of detail, Mike. Won't display them on the screen. But one thing I want to touch on before we run out of time is going back to the frontline engagement, but being cognizant that it can be both a source of resistance through the adoption rates of as we think about these new technologies. But you also mentioned at the top of the conversation how important innovation is, and that frontline engagement can be a source of innovation. The bad news, what we see in the research, 7 out of 10 technicians say that they're encouraged to innovate, but then when we ask, do you feel like you have enough time? Do you have the right resources? That number starts to drop to less than half of those who feel encouraged to innovate. So within your context, to try to put a ribbon on the to tie the conversation up, is there anything that stands out as you're going through this AI journey that you're planning to do in a significantly different way in how you engage your frontline relative to what you've done before in other technology implementations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a really interesting survey output there, and I would say um, we at Peak are probably right in amongst that demographic where it's very easy to encourage innovation in your teams and to tell people you want their ideas and you want to innovate. Really having a framework for a community of field service engineers, giving them a framework to really do that and to see it come to fruition, that's the hard part. And I think that's the area where many of us as service leaders should really take a look at and try and improve on. For me, there's an inherent opportunity with this topic in particular when it comes to an AI for service, because your SMEs are going to be really important and they're going to have to help quote unquote train the model. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, that is a gift wrapped opportunity to go out to your community, to your employees, to your field service engineers on the ground and say, okay, we need your input here. We need your help to train this. And I think that's a potentially really powerful thing. And when it comes to that engagement, you've got a broad spectrum of people as field service engineers. There are going to be natural early adopters and natural skeptics as well. But I think if you can go out with that message to say, we're not going to give you something that's going to tell you the answers. We're going to ask you to work with us to make this work for you. So it's going to evolve in such a way that this is actually going to be given your answers to the
Mm-hmm.
rest of the FSEs that are out there, because we want you to be instrumental in like I say, the training of the model. So for me, the simplest answer to that question is we plan to leverage that as much as possible and to engage our SMEs and our SMEs on the ground as much as we can when we come to the point of development and deployment.
So the one thing where I want to just get your perspective as well is you mentioned at the top 700 employees, I believe, in a global setting. How does that global component play into this? I could see it as there's pros and cons that could come with that.
I think the overwhelming pro for me, and somewhere that I count myself as extremely fortunate to be in the position I am and work with the teams that I do, is the natural diversity that we have by having we have FACs in 28 countries around the globe. So we have a huge people and cultural diversity, and with that brings a diversity of thought as well, which is really important. Because what we have is we have peak FSEs and technical support people around the globe that have a shared mission in supporting our customers to keep the gas flowing, as I say. So they have a shared mission, but they have different challenges within their regions, and they take a different approach to how they meet those challenges. So a problem can be common across all of those teams, but the potential for cross-pollination of ideas and varying different approaches can be a really, really powerful thing when you've got diversity of thought and a common goal.
Yeah, no, that's thank you really for sharing so candidly the way that you're thinking about is about this as you're early in the process, and it shows that that the level of thought that has gone into this. Um, you've shared so much on the professional level. Before we let you go, um, is there something that you can tell us about you from a personal perspective? Perhaps some passion project that you have, something outside of work?
Sure. Yeah. I would love to talk about a passion project. But I'm a relatively new father. I have uh, three kids under three. Well, my boy now who's 3.5. So I have a 3.5-year-old son, and I have 10-month-old identical twin girls. So as anyone else who's a father with multiple children or a parent with multiple children will say, passion projects and hobbies very quickly go on hold. Um, so what I would say is when I'm not thinking about work, the mind's on those kids and what are they up to and what havoc is Jack gonna cause next. But it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, it's maybe a little bit corny, but the kids are my passion. They take up all of my time and all my thought.
Well, no, congratulations. I completely empathize. I just had uh, my first boy 4 months ago,
Mhm.
so I would encourage you to continue sharing and continue enjoying those days.
Yeah.
Thank you once again, Mike. Thank you to our audience. What I repeat, the podcast today was recorded and it is going to be available in all the platforms that you know and love. So have a great rest of the day, Mike. Thank you so much for being part of the board. Looking forward to see you once again in Chicago, and have a great week, everybody.